Hi everyone, I can't stop smiling. Yesterday I was at the UK Supreme Court to bear witness to this historic and incredibly important judgment.
The unanimous decision of this court is that the terms woman and sex in the Equality Act 2010 refer to a biological woman and biological sex.
I did some very quick interviews with people like Maya Forstater, Naomi Cunningham, Michael Foran, Glinner, Helen Joyce, but also some of the women who have been supporting this movement for donkey's years and who you never really get to hear from or see. And of course, Marion and Susan, the warrior women from For Women Scotland. And I hope that all gives you a bit of a flavour of what it was like to be there yesterday. God, amazing. Right, before we dive in, please like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment if you don't know what to say. Just say, a woman is an adult human female. Duh. And if you want to support my channel and my reporting, then please consider becoming one of my subscribers on Patreon, where you can support me monthly or send me some love on a one-off basis via PayPal, or if you prefer, here on YouTube via Super Thanks. Okay. Let's go. It was a gorgeous, beautiful day, and I got there early just to start having some conversations and to take some footage. The media was starting to gather as well. Didn't see any TRAs, so that was good. And that's when I spoke to Maya, Naomi, and Andi. Good morning, Maya. How are you?
Good morning, Mr. Menno. I'm feeling good.
You're feeling good?
Yeah.
That's a good sign.
Well, either way we win. We get clarity, we know what the law says, and then we can do something about it.
There's been so much confusion about it for, well, at least 2 decades, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean, it's like Schrodinger's cat. You know, they say a gender recognition certificate is just admin, it doesn't do anything, and then they turn around and say it gets you to be a woman for all purposes. It can't be both, it has to be one or the other. Either it's a private document and it doesn't mean very much for other people, or it forces other people to accept somebody as being the opposite sex. And if it does that, it destroys women's rights. So we need to know either way.
You're a stalwart of this movement and have been involved in this for many years now to say that sex matters, literally. How does this day feel to you compared to all those other days you've been fighting this?
The very first thing I ever came out to was outside a courtroom. It was outside Westminster Magistrates Court when Linda Bellos and Venice Allan were being prosecuted for malicious communication for just wanting to talk about this. And then quite soon after that, I lost my job for wanting to talk about this. It's quite clear now we can talk about it, and we're talking about it in Parliament, in the media, and in the highest court in the land. And reality will win out. Good morning, Naomi.
Good morning. Do I call you Mr. Menno?
Just Menno. Menno is my name. How are you feeling about today?
Excited. This issue is right on the front pages of all the newspapers. Everyone's talking about it. Everyone's excited about it. So it feels to me that win or lose, we win. Win or lose, sanity wins. Because either we have clarity that the law is sensible and woman just means woman, or else we have clarity that the law is in a terrible mess, and then we know what we're campaigning about.
Exactly.
So it's an exciting day.
Okay, but you've got a good feeling about it.
Ooh, don't make me bet.
Good morning, Andi. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
What brings you here today?
I'm concerned about what the declaration is going to be.
Are you worried?
I think we have cause to be worried. There's absolutely no certainty in what should be a certainty. I'm hoping that they define a woman as an adult human female, an exclusive sex class.
And if that's the outcome, how are you going to celebrate?
Well, after I've had my B12 shot, I may go party with the girls in the pub.
Excellent. Well, good luck today.
Thank you.
And then it was time to go in. It's a very old, beautiful building. Quite a small room. I thought it was going to be much bigger. So it didn't feel like a big, scary, imposing, sort of intimidating space. And then it was the moment of truth. So a guy said, all rise, or the court will rise, or something like that. And so you all have to get up, and then the judges walk in, and it all gets very serious. And they also tell you that you shouldn't whoop or cheer, like based on whatever they say. You have to be really calm, so you have to, compose yourself. First they read out the judgment in another case, then it was our turn. And that's when we got the news that we'd all been waiting for. Now, it started off with the judge saying this was a case that involved different groups of people. So women, then he mentioned trans people and started talking about how it's a small, marginalized community that just wants to live in dignity. And I thought, oh my God, here we go. Is this going to be a repeat of the tickle versus giggle judgment? The judge also talked about a hypothetical trans woman and used the pronoun she. And, a couple of us were shaking our heads and going, fuck, this is not going to go well. Then he also mentioned lesbians. So when you're there, you really don't know which way it's going to go. And then he said this.
The central question on this appeal is the meaning of the terms woman and sex in the Equality Act 2010. Do those terms refer to biological women or biological sex? Or is a woman to be interpreted as extending to a trans woman with a gender recognition certificate? By that I mean a person born male who now possesses a gender recognition certificate amending her gender to female, and sex to be interpreted as including what I will refer to as certificated sex. The unanimous decision of this court is that the terms woman and sex in the Equality Act 2010 refer to a biological woman and biological sex.
And I looked over to where Marion and Susan were sitting, and I could see Susan's shoulders going like this, and she leant forward, and I could see she was struggling. She was hyper nervous like that morning, as you can imagine. And Marion grabbed her hand and wiped away a tear. Oh God, it was huge. These women have been fighting for this for years. And it all started with the three of them, because Trina is their partner in crime. She was up in Edinburgh yesterday, so she couldn't be at the Supreme Court. The three of them having a conversation about, well, wait a second, there's this tiny little act that the Scottish government is trying to push through with a new definition of woman. And if they hadn't noticed that, we would not have had this victory yesterday. And it went from taking issue with that little act and taking legal action against it and losing, and then appealing, and then winning, that started all of this off. And obviously they had to crowdfund for all of that. And this act is called something along the lines of equal gender representation on public boards. So it was just meant to be a little tiny Scottish act. And obviously then For Women Scotland won. So the Scottish government then had to amend their proposed legislation for that. They also released guidance for this new act, but in the guidance they still use the definition of woman as including men. So then For Women Scotland went, well, hold on, now we're going to challenge the guidance. So they took legal action for that. They lost, and that's where we got the now infamous Haldane judgment that basically said that for the purposes of the Equality Act, sex doesn't just refer to biological sex, but also includes those who have a gender recognition certificate. And For Women Scotland went, well, no, that's so wrong. They appealed, that was rejected, and they tried to appeal again. Then the court said, right, send it to the Supreme Court. So this is a good 6 years, I think, of blood, sweat and tears on their part. And this last round alone at the Supreme Court cost about £600,000. And that's what these three women have done. And all of that led to this glorious moment.
We were in a really difficult place in Scotland then. We thought we were going to see rights for women rolled back, and today the judges have said what we always believed to be the case, that women are protected by their biological sex, that sex is real, and that women can now feel safe, that services and spaces designated for women are for women, and we are enormously grateful to the Supreme Court for this ruling.
The other good thing about having gone all the way to the Supreme Court is that this now applies to Scotland, England, and Wales. If they had won only in the courts in Scotland, it would have only applied to Scotland, but now it's almost UK-wide. The victory does not cover Northern Ireland. And one of the most delicious things about it, for me, is for years, and up until yesterday, I guess, we've had these blokes, they say, I'm a woman, I'm a real woman.
I am a real woman, okay?
Blah, blah, blah. And then they get their passports out, right? With an F. Or they have their gender recognition certificate that they wave around. F, F, look, it says F. After yesterday's judgment, it's like, yeah, whatever. You wave it around, the law says, this means nothing to me. This is the biggest legal middle finger to all this trans nonsense that we've ever seen. The moment that really got me personally, as I was sat there and the judge was reading out the judgment, was when he said that the Equality Act protects people on the basis of them being part of a group. It's about the group, not them as an individual as such. So the group, the way the groups have been categorized need to make sense. And the group of women and the group of sexual orientation, like lesbians and gays, they only make sense on the basis of sex. If you don't use sex as the basis, then these groups become completely not cogent, is the word that they use. And it's true. Like, look at lesbians. Akua Reindorf pointed out before how the group of a lesbian, or the category of lesbian, wouldn't make any sense if you don't use sex as the basis. This is what it would be like if you used gender identity or
certificated sex
as the basis for recognizing what a lesbian is.
Thus, a lesbian was either a woman without a GRC or a male with a GRC, who is attracted both to females without GRCs and to males with GRCs, but not to females with GRCs, or to males who identify as women but do not have a GRC.
And the law has now said, yes, that is nonsense, therefore we're not using that. Okay, and then this moment happened where I'd just been talking to some people upstairs. We left the room, then just had a chat with some people, and then I thought, okay, this has all been a bit much. I want to go outside, get some fresh air, and just, be on my own for a little bit. So I said goodbye to some people, then walked down the hall, walked outside, and was just expecting to step out onto the pavement and walk away. But there was a whole group of press, people, journalists, photographers, and lots of people there, obviously because they were waiting for Marion and Susan to come out the building. I never even thought about that. I just walked out, and suddenly there's this big crowd and there's all these cameras in my face. And also inside, you had to be kind of calm and collected and cool. You can't go, wow, yes, because you're in the Supreme Court. So you have to behave. So it was stepping outside that was the first moment that I could show my joy and how happy I was and my elation. So I just went, yes, we won, yeah, or whatever. And that turned into this moment.
In court, campaigners cheered and punched the air.
Later in this handout speech, the Equality Act 2010 gives transgender people protection, not only against discrimination through the protected characteristic of gender reassignment.
And now it's on the BBC and Channel 4 and on TV in Australia. Anyways, what a day. And then I did some interviews to get people's reaction.
I'm here with one of the women of the hour, Susan from For Women Scotland.
Oh,
You've won!
So happy. I'm so thrilled. I can't quite believe it still. I never expected this.
It is a resounding.
Everything was perfect. All the comments were so good, and they said everything we'd said, everything we believe, and I couldn't be happier.
This has been a long road for Women Scotland.
Yes.
And it all started with what sounds like sort of an obscure little act in Scotland somewhere about gender representation on public boards.
Yeah, it's quite incredible that something that seems so inconsequential has had the result of solidifying what equality law means in the country, and that's amazing. So, thank you, Scottish Government. Thank you, Nicola Sturgeon, for all your nonsense, because without that, we probably wouldn't have formed, we wouldn't have fought, we wouldn't have kept going. Even in those dark, dark times, waiting for the gender recognition reform, and all the nonsense that's been thrown at us for so long, and the lies and the smears, and we feel very vindicated today.
And there have been quite a few rounds to this process,
Yes.
going to different courts, losing, appealing, winning, then starting another judicial review, then losing, appealing again, and now here at the Supreme Court, and told that you were right all along.
It can't get better than this. And the wonderful thing about this, actually, if we'd have won earlier in Scotland, there may have been arguments as to whether that was just a Scottish ruling, and there may have been further challenges in the rest of the UK over different pieces of legislation. But this is the Supreme Court of the UK, and they have said this is what sex means in the Equality Act, and you cannot get better than that.
And you can't argue it.
Thank you.
So there was a moment in there when the judge was reading it out, and I think it's when he said that biological sex, it can only be interpreted as sex can only be interpreted as biological sex, and that it was a unanimous decision. Then I saw you kind of like your shoulders go, and you leant forward a little bit, and I thought, it must be so hard to keep all that emotion inside when there's such a history to it, and it's so significant.
It was hearing that. I think Marion and I grabbed hands because we thought, does this mean we've won? But I didn't quite want to believe it until they said that the appeal was allowed. So I think that was where my head was going down a little bit, because I was thinking, don't get too carried away, don't get ahead of yourself. There still might be comments in there that we're not happy about. But a unanimous decision and all those wonderful points that were made in the ruling, I'm so happy and thankful.
I'm so delighted. I'm so kind of overwhelmed by what this actually generally means for women in Great Britain and across the world, in Europe. They'll all be looking at us and going, if they did it, maybe we can do it. And I hope this is a rallying call to all that actually watch, that you may be just a little grassroots group, as we were, that was formed in my living room, but you could be at your own Supreme Court at some point. So never give up the fight, never give up hope. I generally thought we had a good chance of winning, otherwise clearly we wouldn't have taken the case. But I was preparing myself to lose, better that way for your psyche to actually kind of think, right, it's going to be bad. And it was when he said about how sex is biological, I went near the beginning, and that's when Susan and I basically broke down, because that was a tell, even though that we had to wait till the near the end to actually get the proper, but to actually hear that it was a unanimous for all of the Supreme judges, all 5 of them. And when they started listing out the key points, the Lord Hodge read out 9 key points. There's nothing to disagree with. We were just going. They listened. They listened. They listened to us. They listened to the interveners. So really important points, for lesbian and gay rights. So that was a real yes, when that was brought up, and the nonsense of how can you have a pregnant man?
It couldn't have gone any better, really.
Couldn't have gone any better. It genuinely could not have gone any better at all. But a heck of a lot of hard work to be done now.
Is this going to give the SNP a sort of a way out of the trans craziness they've been pushing?
I think they probably would welcome today's judgment, because it's an easy out for them to actually say, well, it's not our fault. It's those horrible pain in the ass women that have actually taken this court, and the Supreme Court made us. That Supreme Court in London. So I think they will use that. But it does give them a way out, and they should jump at it and go, that's it. There is no more GRR, there is no self-ID. Sex is biological. So all these tribunals that are going through up in Scotland and around and UK, here in England, we've just helped out them as well. So
As we're chatting alone, TRA walked past and shouted something about trans rights.
Trans rights are human rights. For now!
What was that?
I've no idea.
What did they say?
Trans rights are human rights. Who said they weren't?
Well,
They've got guys shouting behind us, trans rights are human rights, and not a single
And the
one
judges
of us
just said they are.
Yeah, that's exactly what we actually said they are. So,
I guess one question that's very hard to answer.
What?
If Magdalene was here.
Don't.
Okay.
See, I'm trying to say. I believe that Magdalene is looking down on us today and is going, "Yeah, beauty!" And if she was with us, she'd be dancing on the tables. And luckily, I inherited her cat, Potato, who is currently at home in Edinburgh. And she was the last person I saw when I left. Last person, the cat, Potato. And I was like, "I'm doing it for your mommy," was the last thing.
And you did it.
I said to the cat.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Helen, how are you feeling?
Vindicated. This judgment just could not have been better. The judges of the Supreme Court stood there and said, or sat there and said, what we all knew was true, which is that there really are two sexes and sex really can't change, and you really do have to recognise that for the country's main anti-discrimination law, which is the Equality Act. You cannot protect women against sex discrimination if you say that woman is a mixed sex category. You cannot protect gay people against sexual orientation discrimination if you don't know what it means to be same-sex attracted. And the judges actually said about Sex Matters, which I work for, that our arguments were cogent, which I think we're very proud of. We were so proud to be able to intervene to support For Women Scotland. They brought this long and difficult fight for years, ordinary women who stepped up because their government, the regulator, the government of Westminster, all these people let them down, and these three women stood up, took this all the way to the Supreme Court, won comprehensively, and we're really proud to stand by them.
But I thought it was a bit of a breeze, right? With all that right-wing big money and,
We're not the establishment. The establishment is the people who turned up. I love Kishore. The HRC has been doing good work recently, but they turned up to argue that men and women are not material reality. They argued on the wrong side. They argued on the side of the Scottish government, which is obviously the establishment. You can't be more establishment than the Scottish government. Amnesty turned up to argue that lesbians includes heterosexual men who have a piece of paper saying that they're with women. So the establishment was all on the other side, and all the money, all the regulators, all the big businesses, all the politicians, all the civil servants, all the officials, all the guidance was all on the other side. This was a genuinely grassroots movement. You've never seen a more grassroots movement in your life.
And what does this now mean for Sex Matters?
Well, they always say the fight goes on at this point, don't they? But it's really true. We've got a bunch of other cases coming because this is only one law where sex has become confused. We've applied for judicial review of policies that allow male police officers to strip search women if those male police officers have a piece of paper saying that they're women. That's a different law, but the statements made today by the Supreme Court, I really don't think that they can keep going with that policy. If they do, we will take them to court and we will win. We're also taking a judicial review against the Crown Prosecution Service, which says that a person who conceals their true sex in order to have sex with somebody, that person has not committed a crime, when actually that's sex by deception, which is a crime. The big thing, though, the bigger picture is that people have gone way, way, way beyond the law already. People have been operating policies on the basis of self-ID. And they've been thinking, because organisations like Stonewall told them that that was a good thing, a kind thing, an inclusive thing, and a lawful thing. Today's judgment shows that it's none of those things. It's harmful for women, it's harmful for gay people, especially lesbians. It's not the law. It probably means you're breaking the law. So this is a day that we can use to go back to all these organisations that have got the law wrong and that have written these terrible policies and say to them, you are wrong,
We told you. We've been telling you for years and you haven't been listening, but now you can listen to the Supreme Court. Change your policies.
One thing that the judge pointed out is that this judgment today does not disadvantage so-called trans people in any shape or form.
It actually protects some rights for trans people. So in case people don't understand, there's a separate protected characteristic, which is the protected characteristic of gender reassignment. And that covers all trans people, even the ones who haven't got gender recognition certificates. And one of the really, really good things that the judges said was that having a two-tier system of protecting trans rights is not coherent, is not manageable, and is not fair. So if the Scottish Government had won, then trans people who have a piece of paper would have been a different group than trans people who don't have a piece of paper. But you can't ask to see the piece of paper. You can't use the piece of paper. It's nothing about material reality. You cannot base people's rights on a secret document like the GRC. And we said that in our submissions. So it was amazing to see the Supreme Court agree with us. And it's really, it's such an upside down interpretation of reality and the law to say that woman and man are mixed sex categories based on what piece of paper you hold, that people's heads explode when you try to explain it to them. But basically, if the Scottish Government had won today, what would have happened is that a woman who gets a piece of paper saying she's a man and then gets discriminated against at work because they can all see she's a woman and they think she might head off and have a baby, or she's had a baby and they think that she'll slack at work or something like that, she wouldn't have been able to bring a case on the basis of being a woman and pregnancy and maternity because she's now legally a man. So actually some trans rights are being protected by this ruling. But the big picture is we have the right outcome, a really clear outcome. We have two separate protected characteristics. We protect trans people and we protect people on the basis of sex. We all have a sex, we all need that, but it's mostly women who do.
And did you feel emotional in that room?
I mean, I did, because, you know, I've watched Foran in Scotland and stood by their side, as all of us have, and women all over the UK have, as they fought. And there have been some very dark moments when the Gender Recognition Reform Act was passed in Scotland. You know, that was a miserable Christmas in which the Scottish Government railroaded through an unpopular and rights-destroying act in Holyrood. And, you know, we knew how much that hurt and how those women felt that they were in like a dark night of the soul. And to see them here get what they deserve, which is a ringing endorsement of everything they've said, that their own government got it wrong, their own government was just treating them and talking about them like they were bigots. That's very emotional. I'm emotional for them. But, you know, if I can give you 30 seconds of why I'm emotional for us too, we intervened and we were very proud to be able to do that, to have our application to intervene accepted and to be given an hour to make oral submissions. And today the judges said that our arguments had been cogent. And I think that's judge speak for fucking excellent. And then when they read out their list of reasons, they seemed quite familiar to us. So we really felt that we did something that hardly anyone will ever have the chance to do, which is to actually affect the law, and a law that affects 100% of people, and the law that's about human rights. So I'm saying that as a non-lawyer. But, you know, Andi Carre, who was my boss, Maya Forstater's barrister, Naomi Cunningham, a barrister who's our chair, Michael Foran, a distinguished legal academic who helped us, Ben Cooper, who couldn't be here today, who was the barrister who gave those oral submissions, Peter Daly, who's worked with us as solicitor. All these lawyers have done something that lawyers around the country would give their eye teeth for, which is to make such an important argument in front of the most important court in the land and have everything they said accepted. It's such vindication.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Let's go celebrate.
Yep.
The atmosphere here is fantastic, isn't it?
Yes, crazy, absolutely crazy. I mean, I think there's a lot of relief. There's a lot of kind of built up feelings from a lot of people.
Yes.
We couldn't have had a more resounding, unanimous note from the court that settles this debate once and for all.
It's unequivocal.
Completely unequivocal.
And one thing that was so good to hear is when they said that the Equality Act protects people on the basis of groups.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
And that sexual orientation can only be understood on the basis of sex.
Yeah. I mean, certainly the protected characteristic of sexual orientation in the Equality Act is based on biological sex. The freedom of association for women and for lesbians and for gay men is based on biological sex. There are rights for trans people to associate as well, but that is not something that supersedes on or interferes with the rights of all of the other protected groups that exist within the Equality Act.
Yes.
And we now know unequivocally that biological women are a protected group in the Equality Act, and so are lesbians, and so are gay men.
Fiona, what is your reaction?
Well, it's pure joy and gratitude to the Women for Women Scotland. They had to fight this fight for 5 years. This is the third round in this case. Remember that they lost in the first 2 rounds and they finally got common sense to prevail. And it's a judgment we can all work with now. It's a great day.
And what does this mean for the movement?
Well, we now have all the people who say it's complicated or what about the trans or whatever, we say the highest court in the land has said it's not complicated. It's very simple. We all know what sex means. We know who's male and female. Sometimes sex matters. And when it matters, you have to keep all men out of women's spaces. And we can now enforce that. I think there's lots of work to do, but the movement will carry on now with this absolute rocket charge of fuel behind us.
This has been huge grassroots effort. You know, for Women Scotland have been utterly magnificent in bringing this action today and vindicated today for their courage, their bravery and, you know, their fortitude. A woman is a woman. A man can never be a woman. Common sense has prevailed. The Supreme Court has agreed. This will have profound implications across all areas of policy for women everywhere across the UK. So we've got, you know, a little bit older women than myself, you know, who are sort of fighting individual battles. You know, my personal passion is gender ideology within the police service, who have been entirely captured, and I've been dealing with the police policy to allow male officers to strip search women. This will cause a seismic wave across that policy and all other policies really where gender ideology has infiltrated. And obviously, you know, there's Emma here then from Young WRN, who has particularly suffered from the impact of this as well.
Yeah, so that's why it's so great, because this is so important for so many young women who now don't have to fight any of these battles, because finally the adults are back in the room. And yeah, it's just such a relief. It's just brilliant. I mean, so many brave, courageous women, you know, in Parliament as well. Rosie, Joanna, Neil Hanvey, all Miriam Cates, these people who've stood up when it just has not been popular to do so, and they've been ostracised and criticised, and just that human impact has just been insane. And now hopefully that'll stop. Hopefully people will start working together.
And that's important, because I think Emma's made a really important point, because as well as this being a grassroots effort, this hasn't come without cost. You know, women have suffered because of this to bring this action. Women have lost jobs, they've lost friendship groups, they've faced abuse, they've faced threats and worse. And this is a vindication today for their courage in following this through.
Absolutely. And yeah, they should be celebrated forever, really. What they've done is just, it's a
historic day.
It is a historic day, and we're so lucky to get to be here. And I'm just so emotional about it. It's just great.
I'm here with Jenny from Scottish Lesbians, who were part of the lesbian interveners in this case. How did it feel for you when you heard those words from the judge's mouth?
It felt absolutely amazing. It was such a relief, because I had no idea which way it was going to go. I thought it could go either way, and I didn't want to feel confident, you know, so I was genuinely thrilled and excited and delighted, and also a little bit worried at the amount of stuff we've still got to do.
But now you have the most solid legal basis ever.
Yep, absolutely. We can now officially say that lesbian associations are still a thing. We can keep men out of them, however they choose to identify, and that is a massive step towards regaining what lesbians have lost, which is everything at the moment.
Well, there's been so much confusion, especially pushed by the likes of, you know, the organisations that used to represent the gays and the lesbians. How do you think the gender Borg, if you like, is going to respond to this?
I think, well, we had a young person there just shouting and, you know, trans rights are human rights. I think they're going to be very upset, because I think the youngsters particularly have been sold something that doesn't exist, because humans cannot change sex. With the best will in the world, they cannot change sex. Men can never be lesbians. Women can never be gay men. And the youngsters are being told that something can happen that is impossible. And that's really awful. They have been badly let down in all of this. So I feel actually a bit sorry for the kids. The other part of the gender borg, not so much, because they are mostly men who have decided to elbow their way into places where they're not wanted. And now we can actually legally say to them, you are not wanted, and they still have their rights protected under the Equality Act, as it should be. You know, they still have the protected characteristic of gender reassignment, but they don't get to muscle in on lesbian spaces and say that they're lesbians.
Yes.
That's ended today.
That was absolutely clear.
Yes.
What a relief.
Indeed, yes.
Kate Harris, one of the founders of the LGBT Alliance.
Yes.
So this goes back quite a few years for you, where you got together with Bev.
Yes.
And thought something has to be done to protect the rights of lesbians, gays and bisexuals. What does today's judgment mean to you?
It's fantastic. It really is just a vindication of everything that we've said. For the last 10 years, sex and gender have been completely conflated, muddled up, used, in exchange for one another in laws, in universities, in the NHS. All this now has to change. So we're delighted. And above all, for lesbians and gay men, our right to have single-sex associations is now protected. So we're very, very happy.
Did it get quite emotional for you in there?
It did, because I had For Women Scotland right in front of me sobbing. But for once, I wasn't the crying lesbian. I was the laughing lesbian, and I couldn't be happier. It's so good to hear it stated so clearly. And I loved the way that the word coherence kept being used. There has to be coherence in law between different statutes. And the judges looked at the history of equality legislation over the years to define what was meant in the 2010 Equality Act, which is women, men, sex equals biological sex. Sexual orientation is therefore based on biological sex. It's an amazing day. We've won the battle in the courts. We now have to see how it's implemented. And it's now up to Parliament and up to the media, to all our leaders across society, to absorb the meaning of this judgment and to start to undo the damage that's been wreaked by organisations who've been implementing what we call Stonewall law, which has incorrectly interpreted the Equality Act since Ruth Hunt took over in 2015. She's in the House of Lords over there, and I hope she's utterly ashamed today.
How do you think they will respond?
Well, I've just seen that the government has said, we're very pleased, we've always stood up for single-sex spaces. Well, you could have fooled me. So, of course, we welcome any support that they give to this judgment, but we'll be watching carefully to see what actions they're going to take and to insist that they follow the law as it was meant to be.
LGBT Alliance has been smeared relentlessly ever since it was created. Do you think that will now change, or do you think that will just continue, even though you have the most solid legal basis for your argument?
I think it will accelerate.
Ooh.
There's a big wave of misogyny driving these men, and this will annoy them. They've been told they are men, that they cannot come into our spaces, and we know from experience that every time you tell a man who pretends he's a woman that he's a man, he gets angry. Now we've just got to manage this, and over time hope that it reduces.
From a legal point of view, though, they can't challenge this decision.
No.
No, this is the final no for them, right?
Yes. I mean, I suppose the Scottish Government could go to the European Court of Human Rights, but I think John Swinney will be delighted that he has now got clear rules to follow, and he can step back from the damage that Nicola Sturgeon's regime ran
Do you know, I can't stop smiling. I'm starting to ache a bit here. It's just been absolutely fantastic.
Did you have a certain feeling of which way it was going to go today?
Beforehand, we were feeling really positive, but of course all the sort of last minute nerves start to kick in a couple of days before. Even if we'd lost, I think it would have highlighted the absolute absurdity of the situation that we find ourselves in. So I think it would have been a step forward. But of course, winning like this, I mean, being so clear was incredible. Loved the shout out to LGBT Alliance, of course, from the judge and from all the lesbian interveners, because it's an absolute fact that lesbians are really at the sharp end when it comes to women's rights. You know, we were getting it from both sides. And this is so clear. It's a victory for biology and for reality and for common sense. We know what a woman is. We know what a lesbian is. Isn't it absurd that we end up at the Supreme Court asking a question about so simple, you know, what is a woman? But it's fantastic that we have. And I have to thank the judges as well, because they really dismantled everything, the challenge, line by line. And so we're all just delighted. I've never seen so many lesbians in one place. Lesbians cheering, lesbians singing. So it's just been absolutely, absolutely wild. And big shout out to 4 Women Scotland, who are incredible. They've just worked and worked to get this done.
Yeah.
They have not stopped. So we all owe a huge debt of gratitude to them.
What does this now mean for the LGBT Alliance specifically, and your, you know, the activities of LGBT Alliance, your campaigning, and I guess your standing as well, because LGBT Alliance has been reviled,
all those
and
things,
smeared for so long.
All of those things. And do you know what it does is it clears away some of the mess so that we can begin to concentrate on our services. So we've just launched a campaign about adoption and fostering, for example, for LGBT people. We run our friends groups, which are social groups all around the country. And those things have struggled sometimes because our detractors will talk constantly about the fact that they're not inclusive. Well, that's not how categories work. We're providing services and support for lesbians, gay men and bisexuals. And in order to be able to do that effectively, you must be able to at least define what those people are. And that's what this judgment has done. So it really feels kind of freeing that we can get on with the rest of our work and carry on supporting gay people. It's going to be brilliant.
Right, I am here with the terrible twins, the terrible Terfy Twins. Hello. Okay, you've been involved in this for what, a good 5 years now?
Well, before that, since about 2018, but definitely going down the tree and actually going on protests and making my voice heard since for about 5 years. Yeah.
What does the judgment mean to you?
Everything. It's amazing. It's the beginning of the end, I hope. Yeah. A woman, everybody knows a woman's a biological female. Everybody knows. Yeah. And if you can't define that, you can't define women.
You can't defend this. You can't, and there's no same-sex attraction rights. You know,
and there's so many kids. This ideology has harmed so many people, so many kids, so many people. To think that it's beginning to come to an end, that we're shot across its bows now. You know what I mean? It's wonderful.
Yes, it really is wonderful. I'm so happy. I can't stop smiling today.
I wasn't expecting it.
No.
I really wasn't expecting it. It's the winds of change, I think, and it's just 4 Women Scotland heroes.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
And it's an absolute judgment, isn't it?
It
wasn't wishy-washy.
Couldn't be more. I was expecting, a little bit, a few crumbs so the babies won't bleed, but no, it's comprehensive.
There was early on, one of the judges talked about a trans woman, a hypothetical trans woman, and then used the she pronoun, and I thought,
no.
Here we go.
I know.
But they also use incoherent a few times, and I quite like that.
It's like, wow, one very key point was
certified sex as well.
That when they said, are the Gender Recognition Act and the Equality Act, are there inconsistencies? They just went, yes, there are.
Yes.
And
here they are. Boom, boom, boom.
And the EA trumps the GRA.
Right. So I didn't read, because we were outside screaming.
We were singing and screaming and singing.
So we didn't actually hear like the important, it was just like the initial.
Yeah.
So,
but basically that was the message.
Yeah.
Plus that this decision does not negatively affect or disadvantage trans people in any shape or form.
Well, yeah, it's got nothing to do with them because it's about women and women's rights. So.
How are you going to celebrate?
Oh, well, going to the pub, and probably rolling home very late. Yeah.
You've just heard the judgment.
Yes, which couldn't have gone better. Could not have gone better. Every single point we've always been making. I was particularly happy to see the words incoherent used a lot, because if you say that some men are actually women, then sex-based rights are disappear. So it's wonderful. It's a wonderful, wonderful judgment, and every word of it just, made my heart swell. It's a brilliant day. Brilliant day.
What does this mean for the movement, so to speak?
Well, I think one thing it might mean is that we see a lot less women reported to the police and dragged to courts and fired from Open University or harassed out of the Open University. They don't have a leg to stand on anymore. So the only thing I feel a bit melancholy about is that it's been 10 years nearly of running in place. And Julie Bindel was just saying to me that now she could get back to defending women in prison and abused women and victims of FGM, and we don't have to waste our time with this nonsense that's been kind of the sort of fashionable position for the last 10 years.
Absolutely fantastic result. I mean, if I'm honest, I didn't think it could go another way, because women are women and men are men, and a piece of paper is not going to change that. But what we've got today is, people have been saying, oh, this is about what a woman is. This is not about what a woman is. This is about women having single-sex spaces that men can't go into if they have a piece of paper that costs them £5. So this is a victory. There's more work to be done. There's more to do for women's rights, but we keep fighting.
And what does this mean specifically for sports?
Oh, well, for sports, this could be a game changer now. So we've been seeing slow creep of men into women's sports, male bodies into female sports. Sport is not played with feelings. Sport is played with physical, biological bodies. And so this is one step towards making sure that men cannot play in women's sports. Sebco brought in cheek swabs now, thank goodness, for athletes. Let's see now all sports and all governing bodies stop pussyfooting around and wishy-washy language and keep men out of women's sports.
Sally, what does this judgment mean to you?
Well, it's incredibly important, because in the last few years, lesbians have been having to hide, really, our private organisations. And if we've done anything in public, we've had to protect ourselves from the possibility of male intrusion, men pretending to be women. Today's judgment only affects the very small number of people in this country with a gender recognition certificate. Unfortunately, a much bigger problem is self-ID, which has been embraced by so many organisations across the country, including, sadly, some ex-lesbian and gay organisations, which have been pushed into believing that trans women are women. It's so important that today we've had a judgment which tells us unequivocally that trans women are men. That is the official legal position in the UK. It's also common sense and reality. So it's what you would expect the law to say at the end of the day. So we now know that trans women are men, and no lesbian can have a penis, nor ever has, nor ever will. And this means that we can get on with the fight, which unfortunately we still have on our hands, of stopping men pretending to be women in any other guise and thinking that that gives them women's rights. They're entitled to their own rights. Again, the judgment was very clear that people who have the protected characteristic of gender reassignment are fully protected under the Equality Act, but it does not give them women's rights, and that's all we've ever really said. You cannot be a woman, you cannot be a lesbian if you're a heterosexual man with a bit of paper. That does not make you a lesbian. It makes you a heterosexual man with a bit of paper. And now they can't any longer argue that with us. So as lesbians, it means that we can go back and I can tell my lesbian walking group or book group or whatever, that we don't have to be frightened anymore of what will happen if we say that we're not going to let men in of any description, that we can just clearly and unequivocally say, the law says, no men, trans women are men, go away, leave us alone, and we can get on with climbing hills in Edinburgh in Scotland.
Women means adult human female. Of course, we've got to look after those poor folks, those poor people, even if they've got debilitating porn addictions. they still have human rights, right?
And don't harass them.
No, well, we don't harass them. They harass us, then, as we've said 1,000,000 times.
1,000,000 times.
I don't want to harass them. I just want them to leave me the fuck alone.
And what have the judges confirmed?
An adult is a human, and a woman is an adult human female. I can't even say it. And when we go back to Parliament next Tuesday, fucking the Labour government is going to have to talk about this.
Exactly.
Because every single policy in the land needs to be rewritten now.
Yep.
We need to take gender out.
So, a lot of joy and relief, but also plenty of reminders that we're far from out of the woods and that there's loads of work to be done. Later that evening, there was a party on a rooftop in central London. It was so good to have so many people there together, all celebrating. And Marion and Susan said the following.
What a wonderful turban sight. People that actually know biological reality. That law matters and you can't go beyond it because that's not law. I think Susan and and I'll let Susan speak for herself, but it's been such an overwhelming day. I haven't really quite processed it yet. We generally didn't know until we were in court, and when we heard, as everyone else did, what the result would be. We weren't given any heads up or anything because they were worried it was going to be leaked. So it was really, did we just travel all the way down just for them to go, fuck you? And we made you actually cover extra costs for bringing your lawyer team down as well. And I'd be like, did they make us do this? So we were hoping they didn't, and we hoped for the best, but expected the worst, because that's what we've had in Scotland, really. And so it was such a wonderful thing today to actually realise that, and to hear our legal arguments and those of interveners to actually be reported back to us, and the 9 key points that were handed down. So, but the whole point is, and we couldn't have done this, and we couldn't have done a crowd justice, we couldn't have taken this to the Supreme Court if it wasn't for the donations and the money and the support from all of yourselves and the general public at large, who understood how big this case was, this teeny little case that started off in Scotland with public boards, and how big this was going to actually be to actually understanding what the hell sex actually means in law. But here we are. But again, it's just the start. But I'll let Susan have her words. Well done.
It is extraordinary that it was this ridiculous piece of legislation. But it was one of the first things I think that Trina spotted about this legislation way back, before we were even formed. I think she wrote an article for Fair Play for Women about it. She was so angry about it. And then after For Women Scotland came into existence, she kept saying, but this act. And we didn't think we had a chance of challenging it. We thought we were out of time. I think our lawyers thought we were out of time, but we were allowed to. And who would have thought when that committee sat there and decided to listen to Scottish Trans Alliance and redefine women. I don't think any of us could have envisaged that we would be at the Supreme Court, and we didn't want to be. We wanted to win in the outer house, but actually I'm really glad now. I'm really glad, because they speak for the whole of the UK. Yes. So there can be no question now that the Equality Act means sex. Wonderful women, especially Marion and Susan. And men. We do like men. Come on, read to some reports. And there were times when we were sitting up in that public gallery during the GRR, that moment when the parliamentarians stood up and applauded that row that included some people who have been really nasty and threatening, and now today we are seeing government ministers backpedaling furiously. abusive men, have never had to pretend to be anything else, has come out today and said, well, we were only doing what the UK government and the EU said. So I think I'd like to thank the Scottish government. I'd like to thank Nicola Sturgeon for saying our concerns weren't valid and all the other nasty things she said about us, because I think that she managed to rouse a mob of seriousness. And there's a great movement that's started now. And that I'm so happy to be a part of with all of you guys, because you are all spectacular and we couldn't have done it without everybody. Thank you.
I've got some messages to read out from women all over the world. First of all, Megan Murphy sends her love. She needs all our support right now. The very first one I'm going to read out is from Julie Birchall. She says, I knew you'd do it, now to wreck the rest. Cara Dansky from America. I would like to send a very heartfelt congratulations to 4 Women in Scotland and to all the women and girls in the UK. I know this was a hard-earned victory. We have American TERFs are working hard to restore sanity in the US and the state and federal levels, and we look to Turf Island for inspiration. Okay, now this is from Sal Grover in Australia. A court was only ever needed to decide what a woman is because men decided that they can be women. The law and society has always known what a woman is, for better or for worse. No one will understand the actual turmoil of going through a court case to establish what a woman is unless you've had to do it. It's even more stressful than the stupid premise suggests. Sleepless nights, hair falling out, sporadic, inconsolable crying fits, but yet we persist because we have to. 4 Women in Scotland have my full admiration and more. They're right, they've done the right thing, and history will remember them on the right side. It's inevitable because men will never be women. Never tell women that we're not a reality. We know the reality all too well, and we will fight to defend it. Women have had to fight for everything we have. We've nothing in law society by accident. This is just the latest fight, and albeit possibly the most stupid fight. And then she says, thank you, and in the words of the late, great Magdalene Burns, did I say that wrong? Fuck off, you wanker! As quickly as possible because I know everyone wants to get on. Julie, we've got a message from Redux. Can we have a cheer for Redux? So 3 years ago, Redux launched with the intention of bringing accurate information, informative news to women on how gender ideology was eroding their rights. We're sick of seeing mainstream outlets so casually refer to men as women. Since we've since published 1,783 articles. Significant number which come out of Turf Island. Rapists were referred to as women in court, victims forced to play along, mothers locked up for misgendering on social media, women's shelters and sports sacrificed on the altar of so-called tolerance, situations which almost always seem very bleak. In fact, our first exclusive ever was out of Scotland after we learned that midwifery students at Edinburgh University were being taught to help men, as in men with fully intact penis, to give birth. Perhaps because you were in the thick of it, you fight harder than anyone else to take back your rights, and today you won. Congratulations, women of the United Kingdom, for this momentous victory. And while there is so much more to be done before we can look back at our archive of news from your country as being a total relic of the absurd past, you've more than earned your night of champagne. And then just a last little message from Claire Fox. Goes, oh God, I'm suffering FOMO by not being here today. I've followed every delicious moment from afar and have done a lot of fist pumping, cheering, and yes, crying. But while I'm delighted that the Supreme Court has pronounced in our favour and legally confirmed what we all know, they did the easy bit. All the credit goes to you lot. The bunch of courageous, awkward for stroppy women who were never turning, and gave the rest of us the confidence and the space to speak out. Your guts and your relentless bloody graft, your sacrifices, your toughness in taking on all those vile brickbats, the building of a grassroots movement punching upwards, an activism that has inspired and changing the public mood. Well, it was written about in the history books. I want statues erected throughout the land. And we need room for all of those new houses that Labour promised. But let's start with busts of Marion, Susan and Trina. Well, maybe just a little bit, but the icing on the cake, seeing how upset Jolene Moore, James O'Brien and Jamie Strawberry are shadow losers. We are definitely on the winning team!
And there you go, an incredible day, a momentous ruling that will go down in the history books, just like these incredible women. Now that this judgment is in, we're going to be seeing a lot of other dominoes falling, and I'm here for it. But there's also going to be a huge pushback. At least we now have absolute clarity in law that a woman is, yes, an adult human female, that men can never be women and women can never be men, that the rights of women and girls and of homosexuals are cemented in law on the basis of sex. It's crazy that it's taken such a huge amount of blood, sweat and tears and money to get the highest court in the land to confirm what everybody knows. That a woman
is an adult human female.
This win is ours, and it won't be the last. I'll see you in the next one. Ciao! Thank you so much for watching, and thank you to my PayPal and Patreon supporters. Because of you, I can make videos like this. Special shout out to my big spenders. Help Her Open, Mama Turf and the Turventines, Me Julie, The Lovely Mary, Julia, Dusty, Judels, Leffy, Dorothy, Wildfire, Esther, and Martha. Thank you.
A woman is an adult human female.